Hey folks, welcome back to another video. Got a new job in the shop. Let's go ahead and just dig right into it and I'll show you what we got. Obviously from the thumbnail, you probably saw already we have another Valkyrie. This is a 1998 Valkyrie GL1500C. Pretty, standard Valkyrie. It has a Batwing aftermarket fairing. As far as this bike goes, let me explain to you what the situation is on it. I had to go back in my emails to figure this out, but the first time he reached out to me, this customer lives in Tallahassee, Florida, was in November of 2022. He said, I got this Valkyrie, I'd like to bring it down because he's watched a couple of videos that I had up to that point on Valkyrie work. And I said, sure, but remember what happened in December of 22 was all the insurance bullshit. So I ended up having to basically tell him I couldn't take anything in until we resolved that. Never heard back from him because he found some local old Honda mechanic, he said, to work on it for him. So then fast forward to now, or I should say maybe 2 weeks ago, I get another email from him out of the blue saying, hey, I had this bike worked on locally, still not running right, and now it's running worse. Let's go back to the bike and I'll kind of give you a little bit more detail, and we'll try to crank it here and try to start it, show you what it's doing right now. But that's a really quick and dirty background. Okay, so customer complaint is, right now the customer complaint is it doesn't run. The customer complaint up until it came to the shop here was that it popped at idle and it kind of fell on its face when you got on it and it would die and you'd have to pull over the side of the road and let it sit for a while and it would fire back up. But now the customer complaint is, and I saw this yesterday, I should have filmed it, when you took it off trailer, it wouldn't start at all. It would try to start, but it won't. We'll show you that here in a second. An old Honda mechanic pulled these carbs off. This would have probably been around early 2023. And then he said it ran okay for a while, but it's gotten worse. So it's progressively gone downhill to the point where I explained yesterday, it won't crank at all. Let's go ahead and show you that right now. But my security camera did capture it. Contact. Contact. This is with the enricher on. There goes. Couldn't get it to do that yesterday. You got it right. It smells red. You got it. Where's the top? I'm not going to run it too long. These are the intake manifold O-rings that go in here. There's visible gasket goo that's oozing out of where the O-rings seat against the head. The customer supplied these O-rings, so we're going to go ahead and replace them. So I think we got a vacuum leak. We may have some vacuum hose issues. You know how this is on the Valkyries and the VTXs and the Shadows and things like that. These carb holders are petrified. I mean, they are super petrified. When carb holders like these are that petrified, it's highly likely that they have cracks in them. Plus, they just don't seal well against their mating surfaces. So I've already ordered the parts I need. I've ordered 6 new carb holders, a couple other things, some vacuum line, a new fuel line, fuel hose off the fuel cock on the other side. What I'm going to end up doing is just kind of shotgunning it without taking the carbs off. I don't believe we're going to have to do a full carb job on this. So place your bets. What are the chances that we're ultimately going to have to pull these carbs off? Point, I do not have justification to go through all the labor to pull these carbs out. We're going to take the tank off, get the air box probably off, out of the way. We'll get the manifolds off, replace these carb holders, replace the O-rings. We will replace the fuel delivery side of it, drain the tank, take a look at that fuel cock, put everything back together, put gas in, and I bet you it's going to solve it. If it doesn't, then we'll pull the carbs off. So that's the plan. I pumped out a good amount of fuel out of this thing. Need to get the tank off, obviously. So I want to get this cover plate off. These are definitely not the easiest thing in the world to do. There's definitely a filter in line. It's not supposed to have one. Come to Papa. Nice and clear and safe. There we go. I think this tank is full of crud too. What I want to do now is just let's take a look, see if we see anything. I've been looking at these vacuum lines. I really don't see anything that's terrible as far as any cracks or anything, but sometimes they're deep inside there where these things terminate. I'm going to look at this a little more detailed off camera with the flashlight. I'll report back any findings and then we're going to move on from there. The next step is I'm going to pull the plugs and I want to take a look at the spark plugs to see the way they've been firing. Okay, this side is 246 from the front to the back. This is number 4. I've already looked at number 2. They are definitely a little fouled, a little black. I think this thing's been running rich. So the question begs, why? Why would it be running rich if it's jetted properly and everything else is nominal? You would think it'd be running lean the way it was running. These are iridium plugs. I'm not really sure why these are iridiums, because I don't think it calls for it, but maybe one of the options if I looked it up in the parts fish. You can clean them up really easy just with a little bit of brake clean and wipe them off. Could just be because it's tuned improperly and it's just running poorly overall, but you can see that cleans up pretty well. This 6, same thing, but the interesting thing about it is that the crush washers are not crushed. On 2 and 4, they took some more, you know, half a turn or more before they started to seat. So somebody put these in and really didn't tighten them up. They were very loose. So that's just an observation at this point. All right, folks, change of plans. And this is part of like normal diagnostics is why I'm showing you. This is a clean coffee cup, well, except for that stain on the bottom that I use out here to do this kind of thing. So ignore that. I wiped every scrap of anything loose out of it with brake clean and blew it out. I got a clean hose, a brand new piece of fuel hose that I blew out as well. And I drained 2 carbs, 2 random carbs. On the left side it would be number 4, and on the right side would be number 5. And you see right down inside there, let me see if I can get you zoomed up and we'll take a look and I'll try to swirl it around a little bit. You see that crap floating around in it. There's a bunch of stuff in there. Let me get a coffee stirrer. How apropos for this situation. Stir it up with the coffee stirrer and let it settle. See, there's a bunch of crap in there. We shouldn't have any crap in these carbs whatsoever. Based upon the way the tank looks, he said that the original fuel filter he put in line to replace the one that was in there, which ain't supposed to be there, was really bad. So I'm assuming that we've got crap in these carbs, and whoever did it before may have cleaned them. It may have been repopulated with junk. And so that's why I suspect it's running poorly. It's having a hard time starting, probably because the enricher circuit on these K-hins is probably plugged up completely or partially, and it can't pull fuel. That's probably one of the reasons. The slow circuit also participates in starting because, of course, you know, you're at slow RPM and very high vacuum, so therefore it would help as well. They may be partially plugged up, and that would also explain the popping. So if he's got popping going on, slow circuit problems because of junk in the carbs. So I'm afraid that we're going to have to do the sort of full Monty on this one, unfortunately. I'm not going to go over it step by step with you. I did that on the last Valkyrie video. I'll put a link in the description for that. But because you can read it in the service manual, it's the same thing. I don't think I have a choice at this point. We're going to have to pull the carbs to do it right. It's going to be a waste of time just to replace the O-rings and then come out here and the next thing you know, we put it back together and it doesn't run hardly any better. Somebody's being naughty. Yep. Of course. Let me catch up to this point and show you a couple things. You get the idea from the time warp. Follow the service manual. I got it pulled up myself because I couldn't remember one thing. But essentially what you end up doing is, of course, the tank, take the seat off, take the tank off, and you need to take the air box off, which you saw me do. And then what you need to do is you need to disconnect these hoses from these, this is the pair valve right in the middle. You have pair valve, and it connects to a manifold down with these two little reed valve assemblies that are mounted to the engine. And you simply take these tubes off of there. Now what I want to show you is that whoever put this back together never even put these clamps on properly. You see the 2 clamps on that one? Whoever put this back. This probably doesn't mean anything, but it's emblematic of bad work. So the top one and the bottom one are not engaged where they're supposed to be. This one, the top one is, and the bottom one is not. So it can go way down where it meets the manifold. So they were never put back on. That gives me an indication that the work that was done was sloppy, which further encourages me that this is the right move. So we get the coil out of the way, and you got to take both back engine mounts off. The engine will not fall out, they're just aided supports. And then there's a coil, or maybe two coils, yeah, mounted on this, just kind of slide it out of the way. The airbox has got two hoses on it. This is a drain hose, may have three actually. Yeah, there's a drain hose, then there's like a EGR type hose on it, and then there's a hose over here that goes down to an accumulation little box, like an oil accumulation box. And that's basically the main crankcase vent because it goes right down to there. So there's your crank vent. This is kind of like an EGR thing because it goes into the pair valve right here, okay? So all that stuff comes off the airbox, and you really just got to wrestle it. I mean, you can't be gentle with it. As you pull it up, take the clamps off to get them out of your way because they'll snag everything. And then just watch the wires and pull it out and put it over to the side. We'll take a look at that later if I remember. We just want to separate anything that is mounted to the carbs or the carb rack from a fixed point on the engine, and those tubes are exactly that. Once you do that, and once I do the other engine mount, this one was seized, this bolt for this cover, and this thing will come out. Hopefully on the other side it won't be as bad. These are like decorative covers. I'm not sure if they're aftermarket or just higher sheen chrome. That goes right into aluminum here. This one was missing, so I'll put a bolt in. This one was missing. This is the one I showed you, that little clip I was working on where it was squeaking. So I put a bunch of PB Blaster and I worked it back and forth. I did not want to snap that, so I did not, as far as you know. So now I'll get the engine mount off the other side. We'll break the manifold seals here. We'll probably unclamp these, unbolt these, lift up each side. I'm going to slip those yellow caps in that come with the red-eye kit. Unfortunately, he doesn't do the kits anymore, but I have a crap load of them to protect the intakes. And then we'll put a little bit of silicone spray and twist these intake manifolds off, because I think these things are just petrified. That's why I ordered new ones. They're going to be real tough to do it, trying to pull them off. So if we tried to just leave them hooked up and pull the carbs off, it would be really hard because you'd be fighting three of them. If we pull it up and we have these things, we can do each one individually. We have a mechanical advantage, and we separate them so they can't work as a team. So at that point, that's what we're going to do. So it's really not that hard to do this. Shove the carbs out one side or the other. I don't remember if there is any particular direction it goes. I don't think so, side to side. And I've already got the choke cable off and the throttle cable. So this isn't really that bad. I mean, it's not too terrible to do. You just got to make sure all the hoses are disconnected from what they need to be disconnected from. That's all there is to it. So let's go. I'll put you back on time warp. We'll do the rest. Ta-da! We got the caps on. Looking in there. I tried to take them out this side, as you probably saw from the time warp. Didn't work out too well, and then I thought to myself, why am I dragging the entire rack across the wires? Why not just push it that way? That clears 1, 3, and 5. Get it past there, slide it around so the end of the rack clears the upper radiator hose, and then Bob's your uncle, it's out. That's why you got to take the engine mounts out to slide it back and kind of curl it around like that. And with these caps here, nothing goes in there. But I always triple and quadruple check before I put any carbs back on any bike. I look inside there with at least a flashlight, if not the borescope, the dangly bit. We'll leave this off for now and just leave an earplug in there, which is fine because I got to take it off again and put the cover back on. So yeah, this is a California bike. That's why I didn't recognize this thing, and I'll show you how I realized that. Besides this, let's get that dish towel out of the way. This Honda calls this a secondary air control valve. So it's like a control valve for this, I believe?
Not exactly. One of them is a control valve for the EGR and the other one is a purge valve.
Something like that. If you trace the hoses down, you shall see a canister. So yeah, this is a California bike. It's got to be a canister, and I have never seen these valves before. This one and this one, only that one on the back of these, on this rack. So it's got to be a California bike. So there you go. This is really not that hard to do. If you want to take a Valkyrie rack off, I mean, it really isn't. You know, especially after somebody's worked on it. Some of the stuff was stuck, but most of it came off pretty good. Draining the carbs, flipping them over, taking the float bowls off and seeing what the hell's going on and seeing what's going as far as dirt and stuff in there and get an idea whether or not like float bowl gaskets and things like that were actually replaced. If it all looks good, like they replaced all those inner parts, it just might need to be cleaned. We do that. These are non-adjustable floats. They got plastic tangs. I tell you what, I've had a few plastic tangs in my time as well, but that's another matter. Now, these are plastic tangs. They're non-adjustable, as I said. So if they are way off, then the floats have to be replaced. So I'm just going to run a little bit of compressed air through the carbs when they're in the upright position, just very light, because I want to dry out all the floats.
We're going to do a quick pressure test, and I don't want any residual gas skewing the test.
These look new, the screws, so whoever did it put new screws in, which is good. I think all they did, from the looks of this thing, was just take the float bowls off after taking the carbs out and maybe cleaning it and putting it back together. I got a feeling that this thing is going to need a lot more than what we bargained for originally. I just have a feeling, because they're dirty. I mean, and stuff is just not hooked up exactly right. A couple of vacuum lines that go to those various valves were tied on with a wire tie on the end of the hose, like where it goes on a little tip here or something. It was loose, so there's a potential vacuum leak right there. I don't have the cuff because it sprung a leak, and normally I use that as the accumulator, keep up pressure, but I did it the other day on those CR carbs, just like this, and it worked pretty well. So let's see what it shows us. Anyway, I got it pumped up to 3.5 PSI. It's holding. Let's go to 4. 4.5. Yeah, as far as this goes right now, it's holding. I gotta pull the flow bolt anyway to see what dirt's in there. I kind of wish it wasn't. Whoops, I kind of wish it wasn't, because I can certainly just repair it as it sits, but I don't know if that individual, I don't think these carbs have been split, because well, these are loose. Maybe he did split them. Look at this 10 mil over here, 10 mil nut or 6 mil thread. They're loose. All these are loose. So maybe he did split the carbs. Now, if they split the carbs, they put new O-rings in the joints. If you didn't put new O-rings in the joints, then we're back to my initial question is, how long is this going to last before it starts to leak? Because it's not a question of if, it's a question of when these Valkyries start pissing fuel out the fuel joints, because the O-rings just go bad over the years. Really, how good are the air cut valves, the carbs? Well, they really have to be split completely to check those, because they all have to be taken out. But do I get that involved or not? I may have to call the customer and say, look, I got them out. Take them down to bits and throw them in the ultrasonic and do a really, really, really thorough job, or just get it back together so it runs and hopefully it holds. I don't know. Let me pull the float bowls off and see what it looks like underneath there. Maybe that'll give us a better indication. But right now it's holding pressure just fine. Well, I don't know how long this work was allegedly done, but there is a bunch of crap in the bottom of this one carb. What is this? I think this is number 6. And look at that. These float bowl gaskets have not been replaced. They're not terrible. I'm going to have to call a customer and talk to him, because some of this stuff doesn't look like anybody's in here at all, but perhaps I mean, it could have been a while. It was a while ago, obviously, because I couldn't work on it back 2022, but that was at the end of the year. Let's say it's a year and a half ago. And if he had it done right after that, maybe it's a little over a year ago. Let's say it was a year and a half ago. I don't know why this would be so grungy.
I now know exactly what happened with this. I wasn't misinformed, but I misunderstood. This is something that happens when you work on old bikes, and it's a long project. Sometimes stuff develops as you go along. What happened here is the old Honda mechanic he hired to do the work probably around 2022 or 2023 only did his carb sync to try to get it straightened out. Did not take the carbs out, did not do any cleaning. He did say that the previous owner told him that the previous owner went through the carbs. That could have been years ago, who knows when. So the work we're looking at right now was done by the previous owner to my customer, not anybody interim.
Now the fuel tank has definitely got crap in it, as I showed you before. Not all the screws are new either. I was making an assumption. A couple of them are. So that's indicative that somebody was in here. And they're really tight. Yeah, this one's got crap in the bottom of it too. These don't look so good either as far as cleanliness goes. I mean, they just look dirty. Although they are sealing off. Most likely some of the circuits are blocked or partially blocked. Really, the best way to do this, to do it right, really, we need to split this rack down. We need to split these carbs down to bits. All right, I spoke with a customer, and after some discussion, he authorized tearing them down to bits. I gave him a price. His objective was be able to jump on this thing and ride up to the mountains. He may only keep it another year or two, but he wants to be able to do that and have it reliable. Well, you got these fuel lines here that are cracking at the end. You've got dirty internal carbs, and I have no idea if anybody's ever changed these fuel joints. And as I told him, I'll tell you, there's only two types of fuel joints on multi-cylinder engine carburetor racks. The ones that are not leaking and the ones that are about to leak. And these are going to leak eventually. It's just going to happen. Now, if I take them apart and they look pretty new, like somebody's been in here, because again, some of these nuts are loose, and there's a screw loose on the guy back here, but that's another matter. We won't have to do that. We're going to take the tops off the carbs, which seems counterintuitive, but I want to be able to label these.
I have a number of other videos out there. I'll make sure I put at least one or two links in the description on a detailed Valkyrie carb disassembly. So I'm not going to show it in this video, so we're just going to kind of skip ahead here.
Next, what we need to do is start just taking off stuff we don't need on here. Common things that go to either all the carbs or both sides of a rack or something. I put in one tray or one something like that. And what you have to really, on these Valkyries, what you really have to really pay attention to is this connecting linkage here. You cannot bend this linkage. This linkage can get really bound up if it's bent at all, and if it does that, then the carbs are not going to operate synchronously because of that bend in the binding. So you got to be real careful with that. That's one of the things we got to take off because, again, it's connected to both sides. On this particular one, we have to do it from this side. Well, actually, we can do both of them. There are either one rather. There are little cotter pins between them with little tiny little nylon washers and stuff. Meanwhile, I'll get these fuel lines off. On this side, you see how it's offset? You got a longer one and a shorter one. So I'm going to go ahead and work on this linkage right now. All right, I wanted to show you this because I've never seen it before. This is the arm that I was just talking about that connects the two sides of the carbs. The bearing on the number 3 side completely came apart. So that bearing was no good. This is why the Red Eye kit had the bearings in the kit, because he always wanted you to replace these. Now the kit's not available, but I'll get to what my solution is here in a second. But you can see that big hole right there. Flip it around. Bearing is still in this side, but you see it looks like it's missing something because it's missing a piece of the race. So this whole thing is basically coming apart, and it was just no good. So that could be a huge, huge reason why this thing wasn't running right, because it was asynchronously opening the two sides because of that bearing being bad. It may have been very loose. My solution to it is I'm going to look for new ones. I don't know if I can buy the ones from Honda or not, but I got a couple of them that are perfectly fine that I've replaced off of other Valkyries that had virtually nothing wrong with them. I only replaced them because they came in the kit. Here's our solution. We're just going to put these in if I can't buy brand new ones, but these are going to be perfectly fine. I've never seen them actually go bad. But like I said, the Red Eye kit came with them, and he was very emphatic in his instructions that you need to change those out. Now I see why. So this is the remnants of that bearing as far as little pieces go. So that's a big problem. Something you got to keep an eye on when you're dealing with these Valkyries. That's part of those little tiny bearings. The other thing to keep in mind is these enricher arms. Screws with little plastic washers and a spring. There's like a little wraparound spring in there. And then just kind of very carefully take this off, because what's going to happen is that's going to drop. This goes underneath it, so it's got a little step in it that goes up in that slot. I'll show you a little bit more when we put it back together. All right, now comes a part that can be a little bit tricky. Springs that are on the adjusters. You can kind of see them down inside there. I'll see if I can point to them in editing. What I do is I take these adjusters. I'm going to be bench sinking anyway, and then doing an actual vacuum sink when we get on the bike. And then do the same thing, just kind of keep your finger on it and just pop it out like this. And then when it comes out, it's going to be a lot less tension on it because you've backed off the adjuster. So there's your spring. Now it's just a matter of splitting this, and we've already lost a nut. There's no nut on the end over here. I don't know if it fell off while I was manipulating them or what, but remember, a bunch of these are loose. They're finger tight. When I just talked to the owner, he said that the gentleman that did the work on it recently, all he did was synchronize them. He didn't do any in-depth work at all. He said, but the original owner he got the bike from, said that he had gone through these carbs. So this is probably a byproduct of that service, is the fact that everything is really loose. There's one other thing about breaking these carbs apart that you have to know. I've never run into it. I hope I'm not jinxing myself, but sometimes these steel pins that line up the two carbs can be completely frozen. Now Red Eye gives you a kit that's like a spacer thing that you can use as a thing so you can lever from one to the other. Let's see if they come apart without that, because like I said, I've worked on these bikes that have been sitting 10 plus years and they've never been frozen up, but now I'm probably jinxing myself. So we'll go ahead and just take off the back bracket here. We're going to be separating, remember, these two front carbs. Okay, since this is the left side, this is the right side. This would be number 1, that'd be number 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6. So 1 and 2 are in front of this bracket. And take some photos. I don't need to, I've done this enough. All you got to do is just push out or get out the studs, or pull them, through as much as possible. They look a little rusted, so I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit of PB Blaster on it. Okay, let's see what goes. Well, that's moving okay. See, this one's really loose, see? Strangely satisfying. So we can pull that guy right out. They're all the same length, so they don't have to go in a specific location. This one is definitely more tight. Definitely. So let's go ahead and get some more JB Weld. Yeah, some of this crap in there. And that comes right out. So see the rust? So if we're going to have any problems, we're going to have a problem with it over here, because that's where that rust was built up. Hopefully we don't. Clean all these up real well before we put them back in, naturally. And then we'll do the same over here. Comes right out. And this one here, oh, that one's stuck. Oh boy, that one's stuck. So let's see if we can get her loose. Oh yeah, she's coming loose. They're not that bad. We'll move her back and forth a bit. If you can get them to kind of move a little bit apart. Some of these do look kind of stuck. This one I can, because it's separating already. This one back here is pretty solid. Yeah, they're a little rusted. This can be a real pain in the butt, but I haven't really had too much problems with them in the past. Need a bigger table. Got that out, but now we got a ton of rust again over here. Same situation. Probably the worst ones I've seen as far as big long bolts go. So this one we may have to use the special tool from Red Eye Technical, because we can't be really beating on these things. We can tap on them. Here it goes. Yeah, it's starting to move. You just tap on them lightly. I mean really lightly, but we don't want to do anything, significant to them. All right, I'm gonna go get that. We'll try it. Okay, I have a couple of these because I've ordered several of his kits over time. This just consists of this piece of aluminum with a step milled in it and a couple of washers. And what you do is you put this, working on the bottom of the carbs, you put this so it overhangs like that. Then you can put a screwdriver down in here and just work them apart. Where it comes to here though, not really sure how we're going to do that because the bracket itself is going to give us some trouble, but we may be able to get in bracket and push against that and lever that end off. Once we get a little bit more space, we'll put a little blaster and get it apart. The problem is there's steel pins that go through these brackets. You can see them on the ends here. See those steel pins? They align front bracket, or rear bracket rather. And then you have one in the middle here, the first third actually, and there's a pin going through. It's going to be a longer pin than those. The short pins are usually just where something terminates, because if it was too long, you'd be bolting against the pin. So it's just shorter than the thickness of the material. So we're going to try that. We're going to try to get this thing pull apart. I've never had to do this before. They've all come apart. But, you know, first time for everything. So we'll just do that and see if we can lever it apart a little bit. All right, starting to move a little bit. Let me work on this and see if we can do to get these to come apart. Stand by. All right, making some progress here. Coming off this way, because I just wrapped against the bracket. Nothing I can damage there. So we're gonna, and oh, you know, I almost forgot. Gee whiz, very important, very, very important. You gotta watch out for these guys too, these springs that go between them. See, there's one there, one there, one there, and one there. Pop them out before you do this. I almost forgot because they'll go flying, and those are hard to find usually. I don't know if they're on the OEM parts list or not. This one comes right out, but that one's over a nut. You know, it's over top of a nut, just like this one is over here over top of a nut. Just take those out real quick. Gee, I almost forgot to tell you that. Now I'm gonna pull this other ones out when I start separating it, but tap that a little bit more. There we go. Okay, we're getting there. Yeah, we're getting there. I'm getting wiggle out of it. Get in with the screwdriver and see if we can pry that out. There it goes. See, we're definitely rusted though, so that is why. That is why. Ah, there we go. Number 2. Let me introduce you to number 2. Not that number 2, this number 2. And we'll show you a close-up of the offending pins. How rusted they are. You got a shallow pin up there because it goes through this part of the bracket and just captures the top of that carb. But this one has to do more substantial holding, so it's a lot longer. Now we can at least take the 2 carbs off of that bracket like that and kind of work on them independently. And we got them numbered, so we don't have to worry about screwing that up. Let's see if we can get some down inside there. That was fun. Oh, baby. There we go. Meanwhile, we can pull off this fuel joint. Now, those O-rings most definitely have not been changed. You see what I'm saying about that? Those O-rings haven't been changed. There's a vent joint. They're not as important, but the fuel joint, no stinking way. Those have been changed. They're not in terrible shape, but they're gonna fail, I'm telling you. You see how deformed it is? Maybe you can see it better this way. See how deformed it is? It's kind of like got a umbrella shape to it. That's not long for this world. Yeah, these are stuck bad. Stuck real bad. I'm gonna work on it a little bit more off camera. All right, folks, got this one moving. Doing a little bit of back and forth here between the bottom and the top. I got a really thin blade screwdriver I can get in here and just start working it without damaging the aluminum. I mean, if you make a burr in it, you can just file it off. It's not be a big deal. But now it's starting to go, but these are really stuck. But now it's better. See, now I'm getting it moving. I've never actually had a set of Valkyrie carbs frozen together before, so this is a new experience. They've all just fallen apart just about, even the ones sitting for a million years. Now you saw that. Let me finish getting them all split, and then we'll come back and finish this video out. And if it does okay, which usually these Valkyrie videos do pretty well, so they'll almost definitely be subsequent parts. Here's another fuel joint. As I was explaining to the customer, this is only a matter of time before all of these fuel joints on these old bikes leak. And you don't want to be up in the mountains riding around with your wife or whomever else, and the next thing you know, you've got fuel pouring out everywhere, and you're like, what the hell?
What the hell?
And that's because of a fuel joint problem between two of the carbs. Okay, last one to get apart, and then we'll clean up and rearrange and say goodbye for this one. Yeah, this is 3 and 5. They're the worst, but she's coming. There we go. Yo. Whoa, stay there. I think I'm going to go ahead and order the ones from Red Eye Engineering. What did I call them? Red Eye, whatever it is. Red Eye Technical. Because they're metal and they come with the O-rings, and that solved the O-ring dilemma for me. As far as the O-rings on the breathers go, good luck. We might be able to find them on the OEM parts fish. They're not as important, but they really should be right. These are the most important thing. And as you can see on the fuel T here, they're not in great shape. Probably better than the other ones I showed you, but like I said, this joint over here, I mean, these are real bad. And it's just a matter of time before they're going to fail. So they're hard. If I try to get one off, it may even break in half, but not too terrible. And they do have some, yeah, see, there it goes. That should not happen. You should be able to pull these apart with a great amount of force and maybe stretch them a little bit, but they shouldn't break. I think I'm going to order the fuel T's at least from Red Eye Technical, and just get some vent and regular fuel joint O-rings from Partzilla, and then Bob's your uncle is going to be ready to go back together after I clean everything. Let's go ahead and summarize the findings and the causations of why it was running so crappy, and then we'll close out the video. All right, on all the carbs, it has an air cut valve. There's one laying right there. Air cut valve mounts down in here. It's attached to the carb by a screw which goes right here. And these are the ports in which the O-rings go in various parts of it. There's a little brass fitting that goes in one and a larger O-ring in the other. Just to explain how this thing works, if you can kind of get the idea by looking at the back side here. The air cut valve is supplied by a hose, a little vacuum hose. This is it right here. They were all the same on all 6 carbs. This is pretty distorted, swelled up, and not fitting very well. You generally do not need to use any type of a restraint, or any type of a tie or a clamp on these when they're properly fitting hoses. The port in which that attaches to is right there. And the problem with that is this by the way, this side with the cable tie was on the air cut valve side. And when you put this thing in, it's loose. It just doesn't fit very well. That is not a tight vacuum hose. These have to be super tight. So what you have there is you just got really bad, it's just no good. So you can see how that moves back and forth. That is absolutely a vacuum leak. All 6 carbs were the same way. It's just about as equally as loose on this end too, where it slips over the nipple, vacuum nipple on this end. There's your problem, lady. Times 6 carbs, you have a major vacuum leak. Participatory to that, if you will, is the O-rings that go in here that seal this thing off. They were no good as well. Now the O-rings are right there. The new ones are in packages right there. You have to buy 6 sets of those, or 6 bags I should say, and it's about $100 for all the O-rings, but you need them. You got to replace them. Here's what goes in there in relationship to the air cut valve. You have a little brass fitting with 2 small O-rings that are the exact same size, and then you have 1 larger O-ring. The larger O-ring goes inside that hole there, and then the smaller O-rings articulate with a port on the air cut valve, which gets stuck into the other hole over here. Now the thing with this is these O-rings were bad. When I went to take them off, the little fitting in fact, in particular, There's one that slips off the end, but the other one's actually on a groove. It just broke. So those were no good as well. So you had bad O-rings, certainly a bad hose. Is bad, you're bad. That hose was absolutely not sealing properly on all 6 carbs. And so far I've tested 2 of the air cut valves, the 6 carbs, and they're fine. So they pass all the tests that you normally do on these things. So let me put this stuff away and we'll go to the next thing. All right, the next problem is relative to that linkage I was talking about before, the one with the bearing, the little bearings at the end of it that goes across and joins the 2 banks of carbs. Here's carburetor number 3. This is your base carb for all 6, by the way. So on the right side over here you have 135 and over there you have 246. The linkage goes between number 3, which is the base carb, and number 4 on the other side. So those are the 2 carbs I have laying right here. So you can see that the little tang for it, if you will, on number 4 carb is right there. And then likewise on number 3, although it's kind of turned the other way, you can kind of see it right there. Actually, it's probably better this way. So there's your little tang right in there. The problem lies around the fact that you have the carburetors connected to one another on each bank by the synchronizers. With the exception of number 3, which is the base carb, doesn't have any individual synchronizers, but 1 and 5 do. And on the other side you have 2, 4, 6 that are all individually adjustable, but they're all attached to one another on each side by the synchronizer, the little linkages essentially. Assuming that everything is synchronized and everything is where it's supposed to be. If this linkage has got a bad bearing at one end and the linkage is hooked up properly, you have an idle adjustment right there. Now the idle adjuster is on number 3. There isn't any other idle adjuster. So if you move this a minuscule amount to raise the idle, this arm here has to respond to that. This arm has to move just minuscule amount as well. If you got a lot of slop in one of those bearings, the thing is half popped out or busted apart, you're going to not have that joint movement. You're going to have asynchronous movement. So what happens with that is, because you have springs on each one of these carbs trying to close the butterflies, let's say you tried to raise the idle, you're really only going to end up raising the idle on number 1, 3, and 5, because that's directly connected to this idle adjuster. If there's a bunch of slack in play in here, it's not going to move the other side, or it's not going to move it much. And it's going to be virtually impossible to synchronize the thing. So I would say that's a major player as well, is the fact that this linkage had the bad bearings, which, by the way, new ones are installed. That's what they look like. They look really nice. So that would be the second thing that I would say is a big problem. There would have been no way to get the idle set and the synchronization set properly at idle, because with this linkage bad, if you had, say, set, when these butterflies on the right side, 1, 3, 5, were open a certain amount, and then on the other side they would be open less, because again they're trying to close themselves with those springs, and this was not pushing them all the way because of the play of the slack in one of these bearings. And all I did was disconnect the cotter pin, take off the little the little washers and stuff, and slide the shaft off these little tabs, these little linkages where they go on, little trunnions if you want to call them that. And that's all I did. I didn't stress them, I didn't twist them, I didn't do anything, and the bearing fell apart. So I'm telling you, that has got to be contributory to this because of the reasons I've already cited. The other reason is going to be these guys right here, these intake manifolds. The O-rings are all smashed, they have never been replaced, and somebody's solution, probably the previous owner, was just to put some gasket goo on them and put them back on, which is an absolute zero, no. So this is another big problem. These are the things the customer supplied that I showed earlier in the video that we will be replacing after we clean these things up. So this is also a really big potential for a vacuum leak. This is just emblematic of really sloppy work of the original work that was done on this bike. Another contributing factor to this problem are these carb holders right here. Not only are they totally petrified, but they're damaged as well. You can see the inside here, you got some damage, and the insides of these are kind of tore up on pretty much most of them. You can see it especially right there on the inside corner, right where it meets that shoulder. And if you look really carefully on this, you can see they're starting to crack. And that crack correlates with that edge up inside there where that shoulder is, so that's kind of a stress point. So these were definitely, most likely, but not 100%, part of the problem. If I had gotten it running longer and I could have sprayed it around with some carb clean or some brake clean to see if it changed it at all, how it was running, I could have verified this 100%. It was a moot point though, because once I saw how petrified they were, I was going to change them anyway. Last but certainly not least is the fuel tank and the fuel supply. Here's the fuel filter. There's not supposed to be a fuel filter in line between the fuel cock and the carburetors. It's not supposed to be there. Only fuel filtering is supposed to be this, although inside each carb body there is a small fuel filter. I've covered this in other videos, so I'm not going to go too deeply into it, but deep inside there is a little filter that caps off on the input side, on the inside of it, to help filter that out. This is not uncommon at all. And so this is just part of the secondary filtering. The primary filtering is the filter stack on the fuel cock. More on this here in a second. So we're not supposed to have a fuel filter in line. This is a fuel filter that's typical to Hondas with fuel pumps. I recognize this. The Shadows and anything with a fuel pump. What else? Well, the Magna's got one just, VFRs, yeah. The Magna's got one just like this one. The VFR had one just like this. This is like a Honda or a Honda style, may actually be one because of the number on it, actual Honda item. That's typical with a fuel pump. This is not a filter for a gravity system. So number one, it's the wrong filter. Number two, you're not supposed to have one in there anyway. It just restricts flow. Again, the filtration is from the fuel cock. So let's get back to this. This is the wrong, well, not wrong, but it's an aftermarket fuel cock. I didn't notice it right away until I tried to put, this is an OEM filter stack that I bought from Partzilla. I started to install it and I went, this thing doesn't really fit that well. And I went, So I got it installed and then I really took a really close look at this and then looked at the one online on the Partzilla website. And this is an aftermarket, 100% sure it's an aftermarket. I vehemently oppose and petition against anybody using an aftermarket fuel cock on a motorcycle for reasons that I have covered ad nauseum in other videos, and I won't do it here. So I've talked to a customer and I've already ordered an OEM brand new fuel cock. So I'll just take this guy and I've already taken it off the bill and I'll put it in stock. I'll keep the whole cock, and then unless he wants it back, but I doubt it. And then at least the filter stack I'll put in stock. That way I can use it for something else. This fuel cock was full of junk, and you can see it. I think I have a still photo on the top there when I first was working on it. It's got a piece of this filter stack still on there. There's a bunch of junk in there, and the reason why is that the tank had a bunch of junk in it. I've spent several hours yesterday and the day before with this tank immersed, or I should say filled up with Evapo-Rust, and flushed and flushed and flushed. There was a lot of shit in this tank. I showed you early in the video that I thought that there was, but I did some borescope pics, and I'll shove a couple in here just to show you before and after. There was a crap load of rust and stuff in this tank, and it's not 100% now. It's probably about 98%, but it's as good as I can get it. So I'm pretty confident that when we get a new fuel cock and with the filter sock, this isn't, the filter stack rather, this is an actual one, so this is going to be what's on the new fuel cock as well. Very fine mesh. That's going to filter things out just fine and not populate the float bowls with that gunk like it was before. All right, folks, that's going to be it on video one. I know I kind of breezed over a lot of stuff in this video and didn't cover the detail that I've done in the past, and that's because I've done it in the past. So I'll put a link in the description for the playlist for the last Valkyrie I did, that Valkyrie Interstate, because that one had a lot of detail as far as all the carb stuff goes. Go watch those videos. They're the same carbs, the exception of the California shit on this bike, but pretty much same thing. So you get the information out of there. I didn't see a reason to do it all over again because I've already got it in a couple of videos, a series that is, of different Valkyries that I've done. So go look at that stuff and you get the detail that wasn't in this video. I'm in the process of putting the carbs back together right now. I've done number 1 and number 2. When I get to number 6, I am going to film a little of that. It'll be in video 2 along with the other stuff that we'll pick up basically where we leave off here. And I'll cover just a few things. We're not going to cover a whole lot on re-racking and getting that all back together because, again, it's in other videos. So once we get all back together, we'll get it back on the bike. We'll try it out. I do have a little delay because of the band clamps on the airbox. Let me show you what I mean. These band clamps, I'm not putting these guys back on, these stupid hose clamps. These band clamps are 52 mil band clamps, about 9 mil wide. They're completely missing because these were on instead. I've got 4 of them in stock. You can see they say 52 on the bottom of them. But 4 of them obviously ain't enough. So I've ordered 6 of them. I did initially order them from Partzilla when I ordered that fuel cock I was telling you about, the new OEM one. They showed them in stock. All I really need is 4 of them because I have 4 of them, but I'm missing screws on 2 of them. So I figured I could just kind of put them together that way. And they showed it in stock and they came back with, oh, manufacturer's updating the delivery till the 17th of June. No bueno. So I'm going to cancel that part of the order and keep the fuel cock coming. And I've already ordered 6 of them from Z1 Enterprises. Same thing, 52 mil, about 9 mil wide. So they're not going to come probably till Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. So we're not going to be able to get this back up and running until the middle of next week. So hopefully I'll be able to get that video out next week for Friday or Saturday, like this one's coming out, I think, on a Saturday as well. So I'm going to try my best to do that. But I hope you got something out of this one. I hope you learned something, picked up something, even though it was kind of an abbreviated version. There's a lot of things that come together that participate in performance issues on these engines, especially these Valkyries, with all the vacuum and the EGR and emissions and the air cut valves and things like that. You have to pay attention to all of it. You have to pay attention to everything and test everything. The only way you're going to know that it's going to run right. But if you do all that stuff, put it back together, it'll run sweet. And you're going to see that in video too. So until then, as always, thanks for watching. Don't just repair, restore. Catch you on next video.